Hello, everyone. My name is Numade Belu, and I am NAMI Delaware's Diversity and Equity Fellow. Each month, we bring you stories of different people who are living with or have dealt with mental illness or mental struggles or are just part of the mental health community. We try to focus on themes for each month. It's currently June, which is Pride Month. So we wanted to share a story of someone in the LGBTQAI community. I'm so excited because today I have with me Reverend Brooke Scott, who is not just a part of the community, but also has a wonderful church that helps support members in that community. So thank you so much for joining me, Reverend Scott.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Would you like to tell everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Reverend Brooke Scott. I'm originally from the Philly area and just moved to Delaware in the last year. And I have the joy of doing quite a few things in the area. One of the main things is I'm the pastor of a small church called Church on Main. It's in Middletown. And then I do that part time. And the second part of my job is working up in Wilmington, where we're exploring various forms of spirituality that may or may not be related to church, but are focused on social justice and liberation. So, mental health is something that's very close to me. And it's always been a part of my life and the people around me. And so, always looking forward to how those all intersect.
Yes, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and let us, record this to show viewers because there are so many people where different parts of their personalities do intersect, and sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes they wrestle with each other. Sometimes there's finding a balance. Um, Now, just to give everybody just a little bit of back history, you identify as LGBTQAI, correct?
Yes, I do.
And how was that for you growing up? Was it something I was interested in when I talk to people? Is it something that you knew at a young age? Was it something that you realized later in life?
Yeah, so I identify as bi and pan, as well as the Q. So statistically, people who are bisexual or pansexual, which is under that umbrella, statistically, they can tend to come out a little bit later in life just because we live in a world that is very binary. And so, at least in my case, when I was growing up, I didn't really see an option beyond gay or straight and only liking one gender. So what I was taught was just kind of like you pick one, and so we call that compulsory heterosexuality that I found myself in, where we're all kind of raised as if there are only two options. And so it took a while for me to realize that there was a world of possibilities. And so when I was younger, I would describe myself mostly as just really awkward and kind of intimidated by everybody. But when I had more exposure as a young adult, I realized that there was a place for me inside the acronym. And when I came out, which actually wasn't too long ago, was in grad school, I was able to look back at my life and everything made sense.
Mhm.
The way I felt about myself, the way I felt in my body, the way I felt about various people I'd met, like everything just made sense. So it did take me a while, but yeah, it definitely was there all along.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it very interesting. You mentioned people coming out later in life. I was talking to someone recently during another interview who mentioned that um, there's been a rise in people since the pandemic who have
Mm,
come out, especially like as bisexual and other things. And it has more so to do with people having the time to really sit with themselves and think about things that they may not have previously.
yeah, yeah. I definitely can see that being true. And there's less pressure when you're with yourself and you don't have to feel like you have to fit into a mold that
Mhm.
we often do in like social settings. So it makes sense.
And you mentioned being pansexual. Can you just explain that a little bit for those who may not know?
Yeah, so pansexual is within the bisexual umbrella. It the prefix pan means all, obviously, and it just means being attracted to people of any gender. So it's very similar to bisexual, although they have distinctions and people get very passionate about which one they use.
Mhm.
I happen to use both. Bisexual meaning more than one gender, and pansexual meaning any gender. Um, and people also kind of attribute it to being more attracted to someone's heart, who they are, rather than parts. So
Mhm.
that's how I would describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that definitely comes more into play, like when we think about like transgender, transsexual people, because that sometimes is more, I would say, pansexual leaning if someone is into that versus necessarily sometimes bi, because
Mhm.
it can be a little more binary.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that people who are bisexual and only use that label definitely can have their interest be outside of the binary, but it definitely just in the word itself leaves room for a lot of misconceptions.
Mm.
So, but I kind of have just found some fluidity between the two, and I feel like both fit, and so that's kind of how I've done it.
Now, has coming to, I guess, coming to terms, for lack of a better way to phrase it, or coming, I guess, coming out also works. Has that had any impact on your mental health throughout the years, or even when you're younger, trying to figure it out, or older, making the transition to coming out?
I think when I was younger, I definitely always have had some flavor of depression or anxiety. For me, they've always existed together, and um, we know that part of that is biological, part of that is hereditary. It's also just situational, lots of family stuff, and also now that I look back, I do think that it had to do with this lack of understanding I had of myself and lack of ability to really explore and express. A lot of my life was me repressing things about myself, even if I didn't know at the time what it was exactly. And so I definitely feel like that impacted my growing up. I've always felt very insecure in who I was, insecure in my body, didn't feel confident to like initiate romantic relationships. It took me a while to even date, really. So, definitely see that impacting. And then I think now, um, it has gotten better because I have gotten a little bit more secure in my relationships and job even. I've set boundaries on like the types of things that I do and the type of people that I'm surrounded by. But of course, there's always stress related to if you'll be accepted in this place. And, they say coming out is not something you do once. So you have to kind of keep doing that depending on the setting. And so that can cause some anxiety. Um, so, yeah, but definitely more secure now.
Mhm. Now
As
that
adult.
you've like sort of identified it, and it lets you sort of, it's interesting because labels sometimes feel like, why do we need them? They box people in, but at the same time, they can also bring a level of comfort, like when you can put a name to a thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So,
Now, oh, go ahead.
oh no, I agree.
I was going to say, so, you're Reverend Scott, and I think that sometimes people just trying to correlate or understand a pairing of someone being religious and
Mhm.
part of that community is hard for them to grasp, let alone, being a pastor and part of that community. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, the pastor part came before I knew anything about myself, in terms of sexual identity. So it's been interesting. I actually grew up kind of not really all that religious. My parents both had been raised pretty religious, and then when they got together, they kind of didn't really want to continue in it, and they kind of were like very not trusting of the church as an institution and really wanted to raise me kind of without it. And so I went occasionally with relatives and things, but I describe myself as somebody who has never been satisfied. I always have had a lot of questions.
Mm,
I always want to know more. I always want to challenge what's handed to me. And so for me at the time, it was religion. I felt like I wanted to learn more about it. I had a lot of questions about it because I would go occasionally, and my parents just couldn't answer any of my questions. So I I did it on my own, and so this stubbornness and this curiosity is really what started it. And once I, started asking them to take me to church so that I could learn and get some of those questions answered, I realized that I was really good at it, and
Mm,
it came naturally. And there was something about me that always really was drawn to spiritual ideas. So when I was about 13, I knew that church was where I found a lot of meaning and community. But the first Christian communities that I could really attach myself to were really conservative. And so on top of that added a lot of repression that kept me from being able to explore sexuality until later on. Um, but when I was in college, I ended up going to a Christian university that was liberal arts and exposed me to a lot of different ideas and a lot of different ways of approaching faith. And that's when I realized that there are Christians out there with different perspectives and different theologies that are more embracing and liberatory. And so it just kind of started from there. Started to surround myself with new ideas because of my curiosity. And eventually, almost all of my friends were queer identifying and somewhat religious. And so it made it so that when I came out, I knew that there could still be a place for me in church.
mm. And that's so important, especially if you look to church as a place to find that community. I know for a lot of people, making the choice to come out, or another way I like it phrased is to invite people in versus coming out. But
Yeah,
I know that losing that security can be, really traumatic during that already difficult time.
yeah.
So I'm definitely glad that you're able to keep that. Now you are the head of the church on Main in
Mhm.
Middletown. Could you tell me a little bit more about your church?
Yeah, yeah. So Church on Main is a lot of things. It's a very small worshiping community. It technically is associated with the Presbyterian Church USA, and but it has people from different traditions, different denominations. It's a small, really close knit, loving community. It seeks to be inclusive, particularly of LGBTQ folks. And we tend to draw people who come from various levels of spiritual and religious trauma. We've had a lot of people use the word church hurt to describe their experiences. A lot of people who have been rejected from other faith communities, a lot of people who were like, this is my last chance at this, my last try at this. Um, and so, because of that, they tend to be really open to trying new things, to doing new things in worship, to being given a myriad of interpretations. They embrace creativity. And so it's just a place where they care about inclusion, they care about justice, they care about being involved in their community, and they care about giving a different story. And so I feel like I've fit in really well there. And they're one of the only churches in the area to fly a pride flag and a Black Lives Matter flag. And though we've gotten a lot of pushback, we also have had people come to us because of those flags. And so, yeah, it's just a really small, radical place that I really appreciate.
Yeah. I love that there's that space for people, because I think a lot of times, well, first of all, people go off of what they see in the media, right? So more often than not, you see conservative Christians in the media who aren't embracing and aren't accepting, and that's not always the case. There are
Yeah.
definitely people who are embracing of it. I love that you guys uh, tackle, as you said, church hurt or church trauma, because it is real. I have my
Yeah.
own dose of it from growing up very religious to
Mm,
then transitioning to not, because I
yeah.
needed to sort of get away from that, but still having a sense of spirituality.
Yeah.
So I think it's nice that your church is available for people who want to find their way back there, who miss that community, but
Mhm.
maybe not necessarily the judgment part of it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I mean, unfortunately, especially I think about in light of this week that we've just had, where we are dealing with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and that being so powered by conservative Christianity and how that mingles with politics right now. And so, we try to give a different story, knowing that we are outliers. We know that we're outnumbered when it comes to American Christianity. But I think if people want to hold on to Christ and they want to hold on to these things and want a place to do it, I think that we try to at least, be a holding place for those types of people, and also understand that for some folks it's too much and they just need to leave. And as a pastor, I'm also the type of person who's like, I will pastorally walk you out if that is the healthiest thing for
Yeah.
you. And so, yeah, just trying to meet people where they're at.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. And then you said you also do some work in that field or in that area in Wilmington as well.
Yeah, so in Wilmington, it's a little bit less established right now. I was asked to work out of an established Presbyterian church called Hanover that is looking to fund the work of starting a new community specifically for folks who are interested in spirituality but not church. And so that's something that's also very close to my heart.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a Christian, even though I'm a pastor, there's a part of me that also really embraces so many different types of spirituality. And this feels like a place where I can also really nurture that.
Mhm.
Um, and I've been gathering a group regularly to kind of talk about what it would be like to design something for folks in that area that care a lot about justice, care a lot about liberation, care a lot about healing as well, but want to do that from a variety of religious and spiritual perspectives. So uh, that so far has seemed like people with a lot of church hurt too, but they are not necessarily tied to church or the Christian version of things. So we get to explore Buddhism and indigenous spirituality, and I really love that too.
Mhm. Yeah, I love people being open to exploring and learning about other things. I know when I was young, because I did grow up with a very conservative Christian background, it was actually like frowned upon to want to learn about
Mm,
other religions and things like that, which I think is the opposite of how it should be, because that's how you have real growth, right? There's a reason why people try to take away knowledge as the first way to reel people in and control them. It's because the more knowledge you have, the more you're open to other people. It opens your mindset to
yeah,
what you're accepting of and not. So I love that. I love that you are doing it from a cross point of, religion, spirituality, and social justice, because I think as much as people want to say like, oh, separation of religion and politics and blah, 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 I think it's very clear that that's not what happens, especially in this country, that they're very closely linked.
yeah,
So I think that advocating that they can be linked in a positive way, not
yeah.
just a negative way, I think is crucial.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I agree. That's what I see too. I don't know that in one's mind they can ever be completely separated, just because our politics and our faith are the things that shape our values, shape our movement. So even when we don't think they're showing up, they are. And
Mhm.
so it's like, how do we do that in a more powerful way that's not restrictive? So yeah.
So then I just had just a couple more quick questions, because I know that you, especially with your church, um, work with people who are trying to get through that hurt. Is there any advice that you would give anybody, whether they're part of the LGBTQI community or not, but for transitioning past maybe the hurt of where they've grown up and being open to maybe seeking spirituality in a different way, or trying out a different church like your church on Main?
Mm. Yeah, I think my advice would be to be really patient with yourself. I think that church hurt and church trauma, all the different types of spiritual trauma, I think one of the key things is that they can create a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. So I think it's really important to be gentle and patient with yourself and to just take your time. I think one of the key things is to realize that when it comes to spirituality, there's so many ways to access it. For some people, it is a church, but for a lot of people, it's any community that embraces them fully. A lot of people, it's art forms, it's music, it's nature, it's ancestry, it's so many things. So it's just kind of being patient with yourself in terms of like finding that sweet spot. And then sometimes it starts with just finding like-minded people to just kind of like work through it. But yeah, I would just look in your area for activities that already kind of draw you in, ideas, causes that you're passionate about, hobbies that you have. I feel like those are good places to start.
I love that. And how can people get a hold of you or to contact you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, so if you want to contact Church on Main, we have a Facebook page. You just put in Church on Main, Delaware. We also have an Instagram and Twitter. It's the same, Church on Main, Delaware. And then if you want to contact me personally, I'm on everything. I'm Brooke A. Scott on Facebook, and I'm Brooke Alexandria _ 630 on Instagram. Brooke _ Scott 95 at Twitter. And those are like my personal accounts, but sometimes people find me on there and hear more about what I have to say about things.
Yeah.
But whatever way feels most accessible is fine.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you again so much for your time and for talking. I know it can be a sensitive subject, but the more we talk about it, whether it's mental health or sexual identity, that's how we help remove the stigma. So I appreciate you for taking the time to talk about this with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And thank you so much to everybody who's watching. This is saved as well as previous conversations on different topics. We spoke with the senators for Women's History Month, with one of the top CEOs in Wilmington for Black History Month, and then also have a series called You Are Not Alone, where we talk to different individuals with a wide range of mental illnesses. So all of that is saved in the NAMI Delaware YouTube page. So after you're done with this video, go exploring. There's a lot of other things to see. And thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.